So hello everybody. So today I'm going to give the first introduction to effective altruism. So I don't know how familiar you are with the ideas, but it's going to be like a first part, half an hour, where we're just going to present the key ideas and hopefully say things that are not too controversial within the effective altruism community. And then we'll be discussing things that are not that discussed in the effective altruism community, but I think well, there should be more discussed, so it's going to be about YouTube in particular. So let's start with effective altruism. So it's, two words that usually don't go together. Like we tend to think that effectiveness has to do with, I don't know, like companies and something like that, which is like the sort of the opposite a priori from altruism. But these two words actually come nicely together. Actually, they come nicely together on this equation right here, which is my new effective altruism hat. So I'm going to put it on to do this talk. Now, first, I'm going to talk about altruism. Let's start with perhaps the word that's simpler. Now, altruism. So I'm not sure. I haven't tested. I hope it's going to work. The sound doesn't work. Shit. Sorry. If I can get this on. Nope. How can I get the sound? I should have tested it. Well, if I do this, it's not going to work.
My life is really evil. Like there are people who are starving in the world, and I drive an infinity. That's really evil. There are people who just starve to death. That's all they ever did. There's people who are like born and they go, oh, I'm hungry, and then they just die. And that's all they ever got to do. And meanwhile, I'm in my car, boom, 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 like having a great time, and I sleep like a baby. It's totally my fault, because I could trade my Infinity for like a really good car, like a nice Ford Focus with no miles on it, and I'd get back like $20,000, and I could save hundreds of people from dying of starvation with that money. And every day I don't do it. Every day I make them die with my car.
So this is an extract from the TV show Louis, and it really shows some of the ideas of altruism in general, I guess. Like the fact that in the end we're living quite well here, especially like in Switzerland, and especially here at EPFL in Switzerland. And somehow at the other end of the world there are people suffering and so on. And it seems like we could be doing something for them, and by lowering not that much our life standards. Now, this argument can be put much more to the extreme. Like, so there's this argument by Peter Singer, who's one of the key leading figures in moral philosophy in general, and particularly in effective altruism, where he argues that we actually have a huge moral duty to people in need. Basically, because we're driving like not necessarily Bugatti. I don't have a Bugatti, but like I'm living quite well, and honestly, like I could be giving so much more than I am giving, especially given that I don't give that much. And like more generally, like each of us, like, and like especially I guess your parents or like people who are well off, living working in the industry here in Switzerland, like we're very well off, and just with a small amount of money, we could make a huge difference to lives of many people, especially in developing countries, because over there, of course, $1 has much greater impact than $1 here in Switzerland. So this is the altruist part. Like there's a claim that I could make. I'm not going to dwell too much on this, which is the fact that today altruism is more important than ever before. Like it used to be in the past that it wasn't clear what you could do to really improve the lives of so many people. And in fact, you could argue that if you were back in the 18th century, like the best way to improve the life standards of most people was basically improving the steam engine and like just improving technologies to improve the life standards of everyone. Arguably, this is no longer that much the case today, like we're quite well off, and there are actions that we can take that can have a much greater impact than they used to be. Another reason why altruism is becoming more important than it used to be is because we can afford it. It wasn't really the case before, like if you look back at the 18th century, like most people were not that sufficiently well off to be altruists. Arguably, it's no longer the case. Like in developing countries, like most of us are quite well off, and we can afford to be more altruist. Now, so this is the altruist part of effective altruism. It's not the part that's going to be of interest to me because, well, it's a bit like, well, we should do more for more people. It's the kind of thing that probably you've heard a lot. The interesting part of effective altruism, the one that really makes me fancy thinking about this, let's say, is the effective part. The idea that, well, the key idea is really that not all good actions are equal. There are some actions that are much better than other actions. And we should think about this and undertake the actions that have a much greater impact, especially if they require the same kind of resources. If I have $1 to spend, it's probably better to spend this $1 on actions that are going to have a huge beneficial impact on many people. Now, to illustrate this, so there's this example that Peter Singer likes to give. Like, for instance, one altruist move you can do, one very altruist action you can take, is to give money to train guided dogs for blind people. It's very altruist, like nobody would blame you for this. But the thing is that in order to train one dog for one blind person, you would have to invest a lot of money. Like the training of the dog is estimated at $30,000 for one dog. And the thing is that with the same amount of money, you could do a much bigger impact on so many more people. So typically, there's this disease called trachoma, which makes a lot of children in developing countries, it's mostly in Africa, blind. So these kids who are victims of trachoma, they are blind. And the thing is that we know a cure for this. And the cure is not very expensive. It's estimated at less than $100. So with $30,000, what you could do is give one dog to a blind person that will help him, or you could cure the blindness of 300 kids in developing countries. And it seems that if you know this, if you have this choice, and if you have $30,000 to invest, somehow it feels wrong to be giving it to the guide dog when you could be doing so much more good. That's really the key idea of effective altruism, is that some goods have much greater beneficial impact than others, and we ought to do them rather than those that are good but not sufficiently good compared to alternatives. So that's really the basic idea, but it can be pushed to more extreme and more counterintuitive conclusions. So I started with this example because I think we can all agree that curing the blindness of 300 people is better than giving a guided dog to one blind person. But you can push it to the extreme where it begins to be a bit counterintuitive. So for instance, in his book, Peter Singer argues that giving money to arts, in particular to artistic institutions like the Museum of Modern Art, is not only not very altruist, like not very effective in terms of altruism, but it's actually bad. That's a very weird conclusion to come to. And it's a very weird conclusion because we tend to value arts. We tend to think that giving money to arts is going to improve, well, the art in the city, for instance, which is going to improve the everyday life of people who enjoy this kind of piece of art. And this is true, like indeed, people are happier in cities where there are more arts. But the question that is asked is not, is it good, but is it better than what could have been done otherwise? And the alternative to giving to MoMA is not giving to MoMA. It's as simple as that. The thing is that if you're not giving to MoMA, well, the thing is if you give to MoMA, then your donations will not be taxed, and you're going to have advantages in terms of taxations. And so by giving to MoMA, actually, it's as if you were paying less taxes. So this is amounts of money that don't go to the state or the government, that can be used, for instance, for education and stuff like this. And so overall, there's a non-trivial calculation to be done here. And in his book, Peter Singer argues that the good that you're doing by giving to MoMA is not going to do a lot of good. Why? Because like MoMA is going to invest it in constructing maybe a new part of the museum. And some people are like, millions of people are going to enjoy it, but it's not going to add a huge benefit to their lives. And you can sort of try to quantify how much good it is compared to, say, saving lives. Like, for instance, you can ask yourself, would I, or like, actually in his book, Peter Singer compares this to blindness. And the question he asks is, how much time of blindness would you trade for one visit of the MoMA? And this is an answer that has that probably you can come up with some sort of answer. Like, probably if you're going to be blind for a year, it's not going to be worth it. Like, personally, I wouldn't agree to be blind for a year if, I wouldn't agree to visit the MoMA if I have to be blind for a year afterwards. It doesn't sound like a good trade for me. But like, I would agree to go blind for 1 minute to visit the MoMA, perhaps even like a few hours, maybe not too many hours, but like there's a trade-off here. And if you try to quantify it, you can find out the optimal amount of money, like the trade-off between how much you should give to MoMA versus other kind of charities. And this is really the idea of effective altruism more generally, is to try to quantify all these sort of things. Of course, it's a difficult task, and we're not going to all agree on how to quantify different things. But according to Singer, this is a calculation that we should at least try to do. And a lot of effective altruists have tried to do this for a lot of things that don't seem that easy to measure ahead of time. More generally, it's important to keep in mind that the effectiveness of any moral action is very hard to estimate. It depends on a lot of things, and there are usually hidden costs. Like, if you're giving it to something, this is going to have consequences that are very hard to anticipate ahead of time. And it's even harder because we are not very good at knowing about the world. So this is an extract from a TED talk given by Hans Rosling, which is, let's listen to it.
How did the number of deaths per year from natural disaster, how does that change during the last century? Did it more than double? Did it remain about the same in the world as a whole, or did it decrease to less than half? Please answer, A, B, or C. I see lots of answers. This is much faster than I do it at university.
So try to have an answer, you too.
They keep thinking. Oh, very, very good. And we go to the next question. So how long did women 30 years old in the world go to school? 7 years, 5 years, or 3 years? A, B, or C? Please answer. And we go to the next question. In the last 20 years, how did the percentage of people in the world who live in extreme poverty change? Extreme poverty, not having enough food for the day. Did it almost double? Did it remain more or less the same, or did it half? A, B, or C? Now, answers. You see, death from natural disasters in the world, you can see it from this graph here, from 1900 to 2000. In 1900, there was about 500,000 people who died every year from natural disasters, floods, earthquake, volcanic eruption, whatever, droughts. And then, how did that change? We asked, Gapminder asked the public in Sweden. This is how they answered. The Swedish public answered like this. 50% thought it had doubled, 38% said it's more or less the same, 12% said it had half. This is the best data from the disaster researchers. And it goes up and down, and it goes to the Second World War, and after that it starts to fall, and it keeps falling, and it's down to much less than a half. The world has been much, much more capable as the decades go back to protect people from this, Only 12% of the Swedes know this. So I went to the zoo and I asked the ships.
Swedes.
The ship watch the evening news. So the ships, you know, they just choose by random. So the Swedes answer worse than random. Now, how did you do? That's you. You were beaten by the ships. But it was close. You were 3 times better than the Swedes, you know, but that's not enough. You shouldn't compare yourself to Swedes, you know. You must have higher ambitions in the world. Let's look at the next answer here. Women in school. Here you can see men went 8 years. How long did women go to school? Well, we asked the Swedes like this. And that gives you a hint, doesn't it? The right answer is probably the one where fewest Swedes pick, isn't it? Let's see, here we come. Yes, women have almost catched up. This is the US public. This is the US public, and this is you. Here you come. Well, congratulations, you're twice as good as the Swedes, but you don't...
So yeah, so this way shows that, well, it's very difficult to know about the world as it is right now. This is easy questions, like is the world as it is right now? And if we're trying to think about effective altruism, we want to improve the world. And so we have to talk about how the world is going to be in the future, which is even harder. And here we're worse than random. It's quite unbelievable. And so the conclusion of this is really something to keep in mind that I think effective altruists learn the hard way, I guess, is that you shouldn't trust your guts. Don't trust your guts. That's one of the key messages, because you have a lot of intuitions about the world that depend on probably the medias you're reading, and there are lots of things that are extremely misleading in this. And even if you read a lot of quality data, because I'm sure like the public of TED is reading a lot of very top quality newspapers and stuff like that, it's not necessarily going to drive you in the right direction. It's very hard to know about the world, and you have to be careful about this. Okay, so next slide. Oh yeah, I want to insist on this. Don't trust your gut. This is extremely important, and it's very hard, but there are lots of things about the way our intuitions work that are very wrong. There are very well-known so-called cognitive biases that we have. We tend to overestimate things that are familiar with us, like things that come easy to our mind. We tend to like things that are familiar to us. There are many things that are very wrong with the way we think. And especially when it comes to moral philosophy, or when it comes to knowing about the world in general. Like these kinds of knowledge are extremely hard to have. So again, don't trust your guts with that. So what do you do? If you don't trust your guts, what can you use? So fortunately for us, there have been a lot of great researches that has been done to better understand the world and to better understand what should be done to improve, to have the most effective actions on the world. So I think an important reflex that we should all have is not trust your guts, but trust like the research that has been done, and especially the quality research that has been done. And especially in terms of effective altruism, there has been a lot of very good research that has been done, especially in terms of like global health. There's the World Health Organization, of course, but like also in different areas. Like for instance, there's this association called this charity called GiveWell, which is a meta charity, which is not a charity that tries to do directly good. It's a charity that tries to quantify the good that other charities are doing. So it's a very interesting approach, and it's a very non-trivial thing. It's something that if you go with your guts, probably you're not going to find the charity that has the most beneficial impacts. Like for instance, one interesting thing that Peter Singer discusses in his book is the fact that, for instance, there's a Rockefeller Foundation that tries to give advice to people to people who want to give money. They give advice about which charity they should give money to. And one of the classic measures is how much does a charity spend on administrative stuff, like on itself, basically. And this is actually a very bad measure, because if you look at GiveWell, well, all the money that you give to GiveWell is spent on administrative stuff. Like none of this has a direct impact. But I would argue that GiveWell is doing much more good than most charities, if not all charities. It's not because you're spending money on yourself that you're not doing a lot of good. So there's also this great resource. It's a website, a blog, and a podcast as well, which I highly recommend, which is called 80,000 Hours. And it's based on the observation that there's only so much good you can do if you only do it part-time, or if you only do it on weekends. And actually the most effective way to do a lot of good is to make it basically your career. Now this sounds like a huge sacrifice a priori, like you say, oh, do I really need to spend my whole career doing good, being altruist? Well, it turns out that it's not necessarily that much of a cost necessarily, because most careers that are advised by 80,000 Hours are not like bad careers. They're just careers like that have high impact, and usually they're also careers that are very good for yourself, like there are careers that are really enjoyable. That's also an important part, and we'll be discussing this later on. And there are other resources, I'm not going to present them all, but basically try to seek for the quality information that tries to think in terms of these quantitative effective altruism ideas. Now all of them agree that there are a few key things that makes something important, something that deserves effective altruism effective altruists to care about. And these are the three key properties. So a problem for an effective altruist is going to be important, like something that he should care about, if it is, first of all, overlooked. This is a bit counterintuitive, but if you think about it, like for instance, there are problems like global warming that you've probably all heard of, but everybody has heard of it. So you're not going to add a lot to the whole, there's already a huge amount of money and people who are trying to fight this. So your contribution is going to be one more contribution to something that's already big. As opposed to that, there are many areas that are overlooked, where not many people are working on this. So typically, if there's an area where there are only 10 people working on this, then by starting to work on this yourself, you're adding a lot. You're adding 10% of the manpower. So this is important to care about things that are overlooked, because you're going to have a much greater impact if you start to be focusing on these problems. Another important aspect is impactfulness. Like you want to have actions that are going to affect a lot of people. If you're doing a lot of work to affect only one person, it's only one person. If you're doing the same amount of work but affecting millions of people, it's going to have a much bigger impact, and in terms of effective altruism, is going to be much more effective. And the third thing is tractability. You want to take actions, to focus on problems that are solvable. You don't want to face problems that you have no strategy to face them. Ideally, you should have a plan and have an idea of how likely this plan is to be doing good. So based on these criteria, this has led a lot of effective altruists to identify three main lines of priorities for effective altruism. The first one is poverty and disease. The reason for this is that usually there are lots of problems, especially in developing countries, that can be solved with very little amount of resources. This is because these are poor countries, so like any dollar you give to them makes a big difference. This is one of the main reasons why poverty and disease are so important to effective altruists. Especially when it's about giving money, like usually money is going to have a much greater impact if you're giving it to fight poverty or diseases. Another important line of priority for effective altruists is animal suffering. So basically today we are killing billions of animals and torturing billions of animals to have food every year. So I don't know the exact figures, but it's really huge, like it's a huge amount. And especially in industrialized farms, there's a lot of suffering of animals, and you also want to fight that, and there's not that much money that is already given to fight this and to find alternatives. And the third important thing is existential risks. These are long-term risks of huge catastrophes, if not destructions of humanity. And there are a few that have been identified as key, and we'll be discussing this later on. Okay, another thing that effective altruists mostly, I guess nearly all agree with, is that if you want to have effective impacts on the world, your efforts need to be sustainable. It's usually not good if you're just doing something once and forget about it. So one of the important aspects, especially if you make it your career, is to come back again and again to these kind of problems and to really work hard on them year after year. And this has interesting implications, mostly the fact that it's very important for effective altruists to take care of themselves. It sounds selfish at first. That's why I'm effective altruist, is so that I can take care of myself. But it's actually an important part, because you cannot be sustainable, you cannot sustain your effort if you don't like doing these efforts. And that's why, like, there's this classic idea of if you're being altruist, it means like individual sacrifice. Well, not necessarily. Like, it's not necessarily a sacrifice for yourself. Actually, it's not desirable if it's too big of a sacrifice for yourself. You should try to plan actions that are effective, but still makes you happy. Actually, it's even better if your altruist actions makes you all the more happy. You should aim at this. In fact, much of the book of Peter Singer insists on this. Effective altruists are usually very happy to be effective altruists. If you're doing altruist actions and you're not happy to do them, you're probably doing it wrong. You should try to find happiness in what you're doing so that it's sustainable. That's important. Another important aspect is motivation. Because it's like sometimes we have this day where you feel like, oh, I'm going to do something for the world. But you get this motivation one day, but it's important that this motivation stays, because impactful efforts are those that can last. So it's extremely important to cultivate as well this motivation. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm motivated today, let's see about tomorrow. You should plan for being motivated tomorrow too. And one of the important ways, the most useful way to do this is to gather as a community. That's why I'm so happy that you're so many of you. It's important to have a whole community that supports you, that defends your motivation, and that helps you keep this motivation to be doing good. Other important aspects of taking care of yourself is taking care of what you can do. So you're going to be much more effective if you have a lot of skills, you have a lot of power, you have a lot of influence, and you should work on this as well. So usually, like, the first step that 80,000 hours advise to especially young people is to study. And especially study things that are hard, especially like mathematics, computer science, stuff like that. Because these are skills that are rare and that are going to be extremely useful, likely to be very useful in the future. So you should work on your skills, you should work on your knowledge. It's very important to cultivate this knowledge about the whole world and what are the important problems and so on. So you should try to be curious. If you want to be effective altruist, you should try to know about the world, especially trying to find happiness in learning about the world. And as well, like diplomas and influence, networking, these are things that are important. Even though they sound very selfish, and in some sense they are really selfish, I guess, but they are extremely useful for effective altruism as well. So it's not because something is selfish that it's not an effective altruism move. So really, take care of yourself. This is a really important part of effective altruism. Another important part of effective altruism is making sure that people that are doing effective altruist actions are as well happy, motivated, skillful, and so on. So there's a whole important aspect of effective altruism, which is just supporting and taking care of other effective altruists, and also like soon to be aspiring effective altruists, as I hope you guys are today. Okay, so this concludes the first part about effective altruism. Now I'm going to put down the hat because I'm going to talk more about ideas that are possibly more controversial within the effective altruism community, which is, I'm going to take this very seriously. I think this is really the most important, like very important. In fact, I'm going to make it a claim. And my claim is that promoting effective altruism is an effective altruism priority. What do I mean by that? Well, if you were to do a lot of good, like a brilliant career, giving a lot of money and so on, well, you would be doing some amount of good. But imagine now that you convince 2 people to do the career you would be doing. Then you would have done twice as much good. It's as simple as that. This is a basic idea, and you can scale it up. That's the interesting part. So actually promoting EA is not, I'm going to slightly modify it. I'm going to replace it by large-scale promotion of effective altruism. Because now if I can somehow convince all of you guys, so I don't know exactly how many you are, but like 30 people, let's say, to do effective altruism, like it multiplies by 30 the amount I could have done if I was working all by myself. And large-scale promoting, you can do even more. And I think that this problem of scaling up the promotion of effective altruism ideas is something that is actually overlooked itself. It's something that is hugely impactful. So if I can convince 1,000 people to adopt effective altruism ideas, or a million people to adopt effective altruism ideas, then the impact would be huge, extremely huge. And it's also somehow much more tractable than it seems, I would argue. And the reason why I argue all of this is because of YouTube. So as probably many of you know, I'm a YouTuber. So right now we're on YouTube as well. And I have a YouTube channel, so I'm not the biggest channel at all. I'm quite happy with how big I am, and I'm very fortunate that I'm that big. I have 100,000, 140,000 subscribers. So it's due to a lot of luck and so on. But there are other people like me who have similar amounts of subscribers, if not 10 times more. 100,000 subscribers, 100,000 people. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. The amount of good that 100,000 people can do as opposed to me alone is vastly more, like it's hugely more. And this kind of impact, it's quite common on YouTube. Like I'm not a big YouTuber. There are many people who have much stronger impacts than I am. Now, I don't want to focus too much on these guys. I want also to talk about the many YouTubers who only have 100 subscribers, because 100 subscribers is still a huge amount of subscribers. It's more than the number of people in this room right now. If you can communicate ideas to 100 people, it's huge. It's extremely huge. You don't need to be a big YouTuber to have a huge impact. So that's why, like, caring about social medias in general, but YouTube in particular, which has this ability, because one thing that's particular to YouTube, you'll also find it in podcast, but YouTube and podcast, you get to get the attention of the audience for much longer. Like if you're on Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram, it's like one post, like it's a few seconds of attention. If you go on YouTube, or even more in podcasts, podcasts are amazing for this, you can get the attention of someone and really walk through the ideas, the complex ideas, for instance, of effective altruism for 10 minutes, if not for hours sometimes. And that's why these medias are particularly efficient at spreading the ideas, complex ideas like ideas of effective altruism. So really, I think investing on communication on YouTube is something that's really overlooked. I think there's not enough discussions about this. It's hugely impactful and it's quite tractable. It's not that hard to have 50 subscribers. And it sounds ridiculous to have 50 subscribers, but 50 subscribers is huge. It's still a huge amount. Okay. In fact, it's so huge that I want to show you a video by one of my colleagues. Well, he's a YouTuber, so I guess he's a colleague of mine. Bill Gates.
In this year's annual letter, Melinda and I take the toughest questions we get asked and give our answers. One that's come up for a long time is, as we make the world healthier, the population is going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible. Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster. So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem? What we found out is that as health improves, families choose to have less children. And this effect is very, very dramatic. We find that in every country of the world, this is repeated. The population growth goes down as we improve health. So we've taken that chart that shows the global population growth, and we've actually extended it out all the way to 2100. And we can see that instead of continuing, it actually flattens out. Another way to see that is through this rate of population growth. And you can see that in the 60s, that reached a pretty high number, over 2% per year, and it's now come way, way down. Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down. And so we can feel great about saving those lives.
Yes, so what I found, well, the content of the video is of course very interesting, but what I found really amazing with this example is that here we have the richest, one of the richest guys in the planet, one of the most effective altruists in the planet. He's giving so much money, like billions of dollars, of course. And this guy is really thinking about how to do the most good in the world. And what does he do? He does a YouTube channel. And what is this YouTube channel about? It's about explaining ideas and facts about the world. It means that this guy sees that this is worth his time. And his time is worth billions of dollars, literally. So I think this really shows that the importance that at least Bill Gates gives to communications on YouTube. And I think much more attention should be given to quality information and communication on YouTube. Especially given that educational YouTubers are not very well off. Well, I'm doing fine. I'm not complaining at all. Like I have a job at EPFL. It's absolutely great. But not everyone is Bill Gates. Well, Bill Gates is doing fine also. But I have a lot of friends who have struggled for years and are still struggling to make a living on YouTube, even though they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. It's a bit crazy. Like you have these guys who are doing an amazing amount of good, and some of them are hesitating to shut down their YouTube channel because they don't have sustained funding. Like even I have a 1-year contract here. Like I'm not complaining, of course, but like many of my I have a lot of YouTuber friends. Like even a month ago, I had a YouTuber friend. I still have him. He's still a friend, I think. Who had this 200,000 YouTube subscriber YouTube channel where he's explaining statistics and important ways of doing like the tricks of statistics and the pitfalls you should not fall into. That really important aspects that really are key to effective altruism ideas, like the starting blocks of effective altruism ideas. Well, he's not an effective altruist himself, but yeah, his videos have a strong positive impact. And he had troubles financially. He had to separate with his co-authors, like the people he was running the channel with. And now he's starting his own YouTube channel, and it was really precarious. And it was like he almost quitted YouTube. And he was doing so much good. I think it's such a shame in terms of effective altruism that these guys who are doing so much good do not have a sustained funding. And I can give a lot of many examples of other kinds of YouTube channels who are not like financially, it's usually we can like they sort of manage it, but it's not that sustained. It's not that reassuring. So Kurzgesagt, I'm sure like some of you know, Kurzgesagt is one of these huge YouTube channels, but there are many people working for Kurzgesagt, so I don't really know how they're doing financially, but it's an interesting example because it's a very successful YouTube channel that addresses a lot of difficult topics and that does it extremely well. Like it's really amazing what they're doing. If you don't know them, really check them out. But there are so many of them in the team that, well, many times like they were asking for monies from their subscribers. So it's fine, like if the subscribers are managed to give sustained funding, but like there surely are like other ways to make this kind of funding more sustainable and more reassuring for people who are running these channels. So other channels, like these channels are really amazing. Like I strongly recommend them all. Julia Galef is, well, I think she's one of, I think she's the best thinker in the world. Like she really is amazing at thinking clearly and debating well. Like I strongly recommend her YouTube channel. Robert Miles is doing videos on AI safety and especially for AGI. So also a great channel, a lot of amazing content and so on. He started at some point on his own, asked for money from followers. It should be simpler. Like the thing is that we see those that succeed, but there are so many that did not succeed and that had to quit YouTube or have a side job because they did not have sustained funding. And there's this new YouTube channel, Hot Mess, with PBS, who started a new channel. It's about climate change. Like PBS also had a YouTube channel called the PBS Infinite Series, and they had to shut it down. It's such a shame because it was such a top quality channel. So for French speakers, there are also great YouTube channels that I'm going to recommend quickly. And like, again, all of them are financially, like it's always a question of whether you go professional full-time. It's annoying that it's a problem. I think in terms of effective altruism, the impacts these guys have are huge and could be huger if they were full-time on these kinds of projects. So Homo Fabulous is about a lot of psychology. It's very important to understand psychology because we have a lot of cognitive biases and it's very important to understand them, to correct them. Hygiène Mentale is about thinking clearly, Risk Alpha about statistics, and Le Réveilleur about climate change. I'm not going to dwell too much on this. And the reason why these are very important is that on YouTube you have a lot of quality, but you have also the exact opposite. You can find everything on YouTube. And so if you search for vaccination kills, for instance, on YouTube, then for sure you're going to find one video that confirms your intuition. In fact, you're going to find dozens and dozens and dozens of videos that goes in your direction. YouTube has everything. So whatever you think, you can find something on YouTube that is going to advocate for what you think in a better way than you would. And it directs the opinions and drives the opinions of people in a way that is like massive, really, really massive. And today the anti-vaccine movement is absolutely huge, and this has a lot of huge consequences. And somehow we need manpower to fight this, but it's extremely hard to fight this. So just to give you an idea of the scale of the problem, so there was this article on The Guardian that claims that there were 41,000 cases of measles in 2017, in the first 6 months of 2017, and it claims that it was the double of this is early 2018, and it was the double of the whole year of 2017. So this means that there are about 20,000, so over the year maybe 50,000, something like that, more cases of measles, and that many of them are deadly. So here we're talking about scales that are huge, like tens of thousands of people dying. And this is merely a beginning, like it could go bigger. And then we're starting, and if you think about these numbers, like maybe hundreds of thousands of people, if we just let it go in the next few years, this is like huge, huge, huge. It starts to compare with like the most deadly diseases in the world. Well, the most deadly, one of the most deadly, it depends what you call a disease, but one of the most deadly that effective altruists often talk about is malaria, which kills 700,000 people every year. So, and you know, we're starting to get numbers that are nowhere near 700,000 yet, but they start to be big, and they can be fought quite easily. Just make people vaccinate people. It's a solution that we already have, and that's not very costly. So, and I think that YouTube has a big role to play in this. So why do I think that YouTube has a big role to play in this? It's because one thing that's probably overlooked is the fact that today, if you look at YouTube, every minute there are 4 million views on YouTube. And this is interesting. It's interesting to compare this with the number of Google searches. Today there are 3.7 million Google searches every minute. This means that there are more views on YouTube than searches on Google. People are more influenced by what they view on YouTube than by what they search on Google. And the thing that's even more concerning is the fact that most views on YouTube, more than half of the views on YouTube, are recommended views, or views that are suggested by the YouTube algorithm. So you know when you go to YouTube, you have these suggested videos on the right. You also, if you go to the YouTube homepage, you have suggested video. These are recommended videos, and most videos that people watch are videos that are given to them by the YouTube algorithm, by the YouTube recommender system. So people no longer search for information. People don't search for information. They get the information that they receive, and they receive this information more often than not from the YouTube recommender system. And the YouTube recommender system is great at making you addict to YouTube. Okay, that's why. So the YouTube. So today, the YouTube algorithm system is designed, as far as I understand, and well, YouTube is not very open about this, but there are a few papers about this. But YouTube is maximizing, well, at least that's what people say, is maximizing watch time. It's trying to get you to watch YouTube as much as possible. This is part of the whole economy of attention, where today, like, the thing that companies want from you is to get you to know about them, and to get your attention to sell so that you can consume ads and so on. And so today, attention is a huge part of the economy. And every company is fighting to get your attention. And YouTube is doing it better than everybody. And it maximizes your retention. It wants you to stay on YouTube. And the strategy is going to use to get you to stay on YouTube are not necessarily by showing you the videos you really wanted to have seen. The best strategy is quite often to show you videos that will make you addictive to some topic. And the topic, and there are a few topics that are extremely addictive. Politics, everything about conspiracy theories. These are really addictive videos, and that's why if you're a newcomer to YouTube, if you open a new account on YouTube and you go to the recommended page, the first videos that are going to be recommended, you're going to see a lot of these conspiracy theory videos, a lot of anti-vax videos, because these are videos that people start to watch and they keep watching these kinds of videos. So it's a great strategy for YouTube to recommend these videos, because it has a huge probability of getting you to stay on YouTube. So what I'm saying is that the goal of YouTube, watch time, has potentially very bad consequences in terms of effective altruism, for instance. So this leads me to modify my claim number one. If I want to promote effective altruism idea as much as possible, the big bottleneck is not YouTubers, it's the YouTube algorithm system, the recommender system. And YouTube AI is able to nudge people in one direction or another. And I would argue that it should be a priority for effective altruism to get YouTube to nudge users towards something like effective altruism videos. It's actually a priority today. This is an action that has small cost, small effort, and huge impact. It can potentially impact billions of people almost instantaneously. And over time, if you get used to these effective altruism ideas, you have much greater chances to adopt them. Yeah?
Yeah, the first question is, how can you ask questions?
So you're asking questions about asking questions? Yeah, you can ask a question.
Okay, so the question.
Okay, so you're done.
The question is about nudging the algorithm. So by doing so, there is we open the possibility for other people coming to YouTube and saying that we also want to nudge it.
Yeah.
So I guess in the current state, if it's not tweaked at all, like there is like I agree that it's a good, it would be good if it worked, but I'm saying that there is like a certain downside of doing so, meaning that if you say that it's allowed for a good cause to do so, then there is a big question on what is a good cause. For example, I want to sell my music and... Like,
so I'm going to talk about this next time.
Oh,
yeah, well, so there's one part of this is that, okay, so we should make, so I argue we should make a YouTube AI nudge towards EA, but it's not clear whether this should be public information. Like maybe they should do it in private to avoid controversies. Okay, so the second claim, which is related to much of your question, is that doing so is extremely hard. This is called the value loading problem. Actually, it has a name. It was introduced by Nick Bostrom. It's called value loading. It's the idea that any artificial intelligence or algorithm, whatever you want to call them, well, it would be better if it has some moral values, some human values, and you need to load these values into the algorithm. And this is a very, very hard problem. I would argue that this is one of the most difficult problems that there are, but it's not untractable, hopefully. It raises both technical and non-technical challenges. Well, one of the non-technical challenges is typically if you make it public, like you say publicly, YouTube is going to do value loading today, well, it's going to lead to a lot of controversies, and yeah, it's a difficult, it's a tough one. Now I'm going to insist on why this value loading is very hard. It's extremely hard problem, and we need to think this carefully. Like you should not try to tweak YouTube right now, especially without testing. This is a large-scale system, so any tweak, like it's very bad engineering way to you shouldn't do engineering by tweaking things. You should think, it's important to think these clearly and to try to anticipate potential consequences. So why is value loading so hard? Because it's essentially impossible to get it 100%. It's not even clear what it means to get value loading at 100%. But probably it's a machine learning system. Machine learning tends to be very good at getting 90% accuracy, but it's extremely hard to get 99.9999% accuracy. It's impossible to get 100%. And okay, so let's assume like we make an AI, a YouTube AI, let's say, that is right 99.9999% of the time. Let's say it gets something wrong 1 time out of 1,000,000, which is extremely good, which is much better than most of the things we're doing in AI by today's standards. If we manage to do this, it still means that 1 time out of 1,000,000, it gets something wrong and can get potentially very wrong. And this is potentially very bad because the YouTube algorithm system is taking billions of decisions every day, probably every minute. No, every day. And every day it takes billions of decisions, so if it gets 1 in 1,000,000 wrong, it still gets 1,000 decisions wrong, which is not negligible. But it's even worse than that, because if people understand the flaws of the YouTube algorithm system, they can exploit it. Like for a long time, there was this race between the Google, like Google was like the recommender, like the answer of most things, and you wanted to be well ranked on Google. So there was this whole industry of so-called SEO optimization. Like you wanted to maximize your rank on Google, so there was this whole game. And there's going to be this kind of game as well. Whatever the YouTube AI is going to do, people are going to try to hack it. And so the 1 in 1,000,000 case that were appearing when we program our AI, well, maybe it's going to be most cases now, because hackers are going to focus on this case. So actually, it's not 1 in 1,000,000. It could be like 50% of the time, hackers are going to take advantage of this. And this is very hard to anticipate, and there needs to be a lot of research on how to anticipate this and make sure the system is still going to work, even if hackers try to take advantage of the flaws of the system. And the reason why this is extremely hard is that you could argue there are solutions to these kinds of problems, but I can solve this problem, but I need to do this and this, and this and this and that. And you could, it's very tempting to say there are a lot of rules that should be followed by the YouTube algorithm system, for instance. But it's extremely problematic because if you ask too many constraints, then YouTube is just going to say, no, we're not going to do this because it's too constraining. And they have to deliver a service, so it cannot be too constraining. You cannot put too much constraints on the constraints you're going to put on an AI. There are constraints to constraints. And like another reason for this is that even if YouTube say, okay, we're going to apply your system, then suddenly YouTube is probably going to be very slow, very annoying, and people are going to move to another service. There's a competition between different AIs. And if you want the leading AI to be value loaded, the value loading cannot be too costly. Otherwise, it's going to be overtaken. And third reason why value loading is extremely hard is that we're all going to disagree about the values to be programmed. Like even if we're trying to do well, we disagree about a lot of things. Even well-intentioned people disagree. And it's extremely hard to get it right. We need to mitigate our disagreement somehow. But it's extremely hard because more often than not, we debate on Twitter or Facebook. And Twitter and Facebook are extremely bad places to debate. Like people usually have very bad debates over there. But even like in general, like in family dinners, it's not easy to get a debate right. And we need to improve the way we're debating. And to agree that we're not going to agree on everything. But we need to find ways to take decisions even when we disagree. So all this means that led Nick Bostrom to claim that solving the value loading problem is a research challenge worthy of some of the next generation's best mathematical talent. I agree with the fact that it is extremely hard. I disagree with Bostrom in the fact that it's a next generation's problem. The YouTube algorithm is already there and it needs to be value loaded, I would argue. So it's not for the next generation. Like we should be working right now on how to improve, on how to solve value loading, or at least propose solutions to partially solve it. So if I combine my two claims, so we needed value loading, and value loading is very hard. So solving the value loading is actually, I would argue, today's greatest effective altruism priority. We need to know how to program values into algorithmic systems. And this is something that I started to think a lot about a few months ago, and so like maybe 6 months ago, something like that, in June. So in June, I was really worried about this, and so I worked a little bit on this, and I wrote a paper on the roadmap for the value loading problem, which presents both why it is extremely important. I think it is today's top priority. It also explains what, like it has a roadmap, like a master plan to how to solve it, because it's very difficult, and I do not claim to solve it at all, but I propose solutions to hopefully better structure our approach to solving this. And it also gives a lot of ideas to how to help solving it without doing technical work, like without doing AI research. A third claim that I would make, I have no idea how I'm doing time-wise, I hope it's not too long. But the third claim that I would make is that solving value loading is also extremely important for tomorrow. Because so far I've been talking a lot about the AIs that exist today, like especially the YouTube recommender system. But you can imagine that in the future, AIs are going to improve. In fact, AIs are improving every day at a pace that is quite unbelievable. Like I'm in the field, I'm popularizing the field, like I'm trying to talk about the field, and it's extremely hard because things are moving so fast. And something that was done 6 months ago can be obsolete by now. It's going very, very fast, surprisingly fast. And so we need to prepare ourselves for future AIs. Like the time it's going to take us to solve the value loading, AIs will have improved already. So we need to prepare solutions for future AIs. And I would argue we should prepare for the worst case solutions, the worst case settings. And the worst case settings could be AIs reaching very, very high cognitive abilities, including human level capabilities in the future, maybe in 5 years or 10 years. We should be prepared for this. Even if it's not likely, we should be prepared for this. That's my argument. And we really need this because Bostrom argues that there's no way that things go well if we don't solve the value loading problem. He argues that there's no way around this difficult problem. And I agree with this. Like this is, like, I have tried to think a lot about ways to mitigate the risks without solving the value loading problem, and I don't see any. So we really should discuss value loading problem as a key priority, not only for today, but as well for the future, I would argue. Now, what can be done about this? The first thing to notice is that basically there's essentially today near zero research on value loading. Like there are things related to value loading, but like value loading itself as a goal, I would argue there's not, well, essentially no good research on this. At least there needs to be much more research on this. And one reason why there's no research is that there's no funding for this kind of research, at least so far. Like MIT has announced that it's going to put $1 billion in ethics of AI, so maybe it's going to change a little bit in the coming years. But $1 billion is great. But everyone should try to fund this, and hopefully not just MIT. Probably the $1 billion is not going to go all into value loading. So yeah, we need to care more about value loading and to fund this kind of research. And we also need to attract talents because there are lots of technical challenges that are extremely hard, and you really need the best people working on this problem. Like it's really important that the top scientists work on these kinds of problems and care about these kinds of problems. And not only them, I would argue it's important to make this very widespread. So like even like I would argue artists should care much more about this problem, because if artists care about this problem, they can spread these ideas in a manner that may be much more efficient than, or at least orthogonal to the approaches that I would be using, for instance. Another thing that's important is to value safety. I think this is increasingly the case, and it's very good that it's increasingly the case. But if you're starting a startup, for instance, you're not going to brag about the safety protocols you've put in. Like you're going to brag about deep learning, probably, something like that. It's important to brag about safety. It's important that people who don't brag about safety are frowned upon, something like that. And one last thing is to improve debating. Like we need to get better at debating these ideas, because unfortunately these ideas are quite often extremely poorly debated, even by experts of AI. There are huge disagreements between experts of AIs that are like debating like cats and dogs, and very badly. So we need to be discussing these ideas much better. And just to conclude this talk, so there's a Google form. So either you're motivated enough to write this on your phone, or you can go to the event on Facebook. There's probably a link somewhere on this page, and you can answer this form to improve the experience of Effective Altruism Lausanne. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dave. I thank Lee. I thank also you for coming. Just another thing, I said that I wanted to talk a bit about the effective altruism movement here, because as Lee said, one of our top priorities in the effective altruism movement is to spread effective altruism so that other conferences like this can take place. So what do we do? So one of our common meetings is a bi-weekly discussion group that takes place, like another one will take place next week. We meet at Esplanade around 6:15, and we discuss problems about effective altruism. We discussed once about global health, and we discussed also, especially one of the TED Talks that was in the conference, we discussed one about pandemics and the existential risks it poses. And then we do other activities. In the next semester, we will have another career workshop to help people figure out maybe how to go and have a career that is very fulfilling. They talked about that. We'll also have maybe a more in-depth workshop about effective altruism, because it's a growing movement. It has a lot of complex philosophical basics that one needs to pause more time to fully understand. With this, I invite you to maybe get a drink or eat something.
So maybe we can do I don't know if people have questions, we can do
yes, of course. But first, small questions to the...
Yeah.
Question about YouTube. So how do you view Google can actually do so? So what needs to happen in order for Google to respond to that? Should it be like an open letter, or should, like, I don't know, people vote for it somehow, or I don't know, how do you imagine such a decision can be taken?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure what is the best way to go, but like, I think that YouTube is very careful about its image, and there are actions undertaken by YouTube. So YouTube belongs to Google, for those who don't know. And for instance, YouTube is very, like YouTube promoting anti-vax is not good publicity for YouTube. And YouTube is trying to invest as well in education, in educational YouTube. So YouTube kind of already cares about this. And I think it's important that they see the value of caring about it at an algorithmic level. So, like, I don't have a lot of friends at YouTube or Google, at least, that listen to me and that can make a big difference. But these ideas need to spread, I think. Like, they need to be more okay to be believing these kind of things. Because whenever I discuss these kinds of ideas to basically anyone, like, except with people I always talk to, they get used to what I'm saying. But most people are very scared by these ideas, the idea that you're going to trick the algorithm of YouTube. So it needs to be more okay, and for this, I think, as a first step. And then, well, any good idea is welcome. Like, yeah, not sure what is the best way. Yeah.
For the value loading problem, it seems that the way you presented it, we still have to load our values into the algorithm, which means that, I mean, we have our ideas of what good values are, and other people have their ideas of what good values are. So how do you separate, how do you distinguish, like, what good values are? Like, the KKK also loads their values in. They can optimize their websites as well.
Yeah, so it's a very good point. Like, if you will do an international democratic vote, it's not clear it's going to go the right way. And I would argue, like, even if you just ask me, the values I would put in this algorithm are probably very scary to most of you, even to myself. Like, so it's important to be aware of the limits of our own intuitions of moral philosophy. And so what I argue, like, so there's this idea introduced by Eliezer Yudkowsky, which is the idea that we should not load values that are our current values, but we should load values that are what our values would be if we had time to better think these ideas through, if we remove the cognitive biases and stuff like that. So yeah, I would argue that this is what should be done, and it's very difficult.
It seems like an impossible task.
Yeah.
If we would load the values that we would have if we were better thinking about this, but we're already thinking about it as the best of our current abilities.
So, well,
I can't say what my values would be if I had perfect knowledge, because I don't have.
Yeah, so of course, well, unfortunately, we cannot do this. Well, the hope is that maybe with an algorithmic systems, we can do better than what we think we would think. That's sort of the hope. It raises a lot of interesting problems. Like, for instance, how can you be convinced that, like, the machine that computed what you would want if you thought longer and so on, how does this machine convince you that it is indeed what you would want if you thought longer? It's a very, very difficult problem, and yeah, we need to think more about these problems. And it's not clear it's tractable, but I hope it's tractable. Any other question? Yeah.
What would a first-year student do if they want to work on YouTube?
Okay, so I think it's great to start a YouTube channel, but don't have the hope to be seen a lot. And the reason why it's still great to do a YouTube channel is that it's a place where you have to explain your ideas. It's like starting a blog, except that the difference is, I would argue, is that when you're doing a YouTube video, you spend more time doing the YouTube video than writing a blog. And because these guys who write pages and pages of blogs, and they don't really, like, it's really easy to just write without thinking, and it's important to write and think while you're writing. And it's an effort that's very valuable because it helps you understand what you would want if you were thinking longer. So it's the kind of effort that's very productive. It's useful to learn as well if you're doing a YouTube channel on what you're studying. Like, I learned most of what I know by doing YouTube videos. It's weird to say, but yeah, it forces you to be more in depth into the material you're teaching. So I still think that doing YouTube videos, or at least like having a blog, let's say, is valuable for this reason. And who knows, if you're doing it well, maybe it can have a huge impact. But like for first year students, the most important advice is like do well, like study well, have good grades, and learn a lot. You're going to be much more valuable and able to do much bigger impacts if you're doing this.
Merci. Question.
Yes. Yeah.
You think that today YouTube will be okay to have to be less addictive, but to be more effective altruism? It could be.
Well, so it's a cost for YouTube. Like financially, it's a cost. Then you could argue that okay, it's a cost for YouTube, but come on, YouTube is not, especially if you look at Google. Google is not like going to go bankrupt tomorrow. So it's a cost, but it's for much greater impact, more beneficial impact. And like I think a lot of people within YouTube and within Google. So there's this guy, I don't remember his name. I remember only his first name, which is a bit embarrassing. But he quitted Google because he thought what he was doing at Google was not good, basically. And he gave TED Talks about this, especially the economy of attention leads to poor consequences. But he argues that actually most people at Google and YouTube have this frame of mind, like they want to do good. And they're well off, so they don't need to be doing bad things. It's just that it's not yet taken for granted that it's okay to want to do good rather than doing what's good for the company. But I think this can change. We're in a situation where most people are sufficiently well off in these companies to care about doing good rather than keeping their positions. Like most people are already trying to keep their position in the company or go higher in the company. And this is due to incentives and the atmospheres in the company. If it changes, like I think things can change. So I would bet more on Google. It's a weird thing to say, but I would bet more on Google than on many governments, like for instance the US government. I think I would not be the only one. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like in order to promote effective altruism on YouTube, we need to solve, at least to some extent, the value loading problem, right? And it is costly. So the question is, isn't it cheaper to just buy ads on YouTube than to tweak the algorithm, just to make it, just to take the existing system for like promoting videos and use it?
Yeah. So. Well, it's not one or the other. You can do both. So I don't know how effective the YouTube ads are. What I do know is that they don't pay a lot of money to creators. But yeah, it's an idea like promoting effective ads. So there's also a trade-off in spreading the ideas of effective altruism, because if it spreads too fast and too poorly, like if it's just like sharing these ideas very quickly and not in depth, they will easily be misinterpreted. Even if you're doing a good job at making a good summary of effective altruism in one sentence or in like 5 sentences, even if you're doing the best job possible, there are going to be a lot of people who misinterpret it. So it's very important to be careful about how you do this, and there's a trade-off about going fast and keeping the core ideas as clear as possible. Yeah, so that's why also I think it's not necessarily a good idea to present these as effective altruism ideas. You can just present things at how to think more clearly about this topic, how to question your moral intuition, or stuff like that. Any last question? Okay, so thank you for your attention.